I begin, it would be remiss for me to not mention the following medrash that when Yaakov came and he saw Rachel at the well. So the medrash says that she was one person and the shepherds there in Haran didn't harass her. They left her alone, let her go to the well. And the medrash contrasts that when Moshe came to Midian and Yisro's 7 daughters, not one, but 7 daughters came to the well, they were harassed. Moshe had to go ahead and save them. And the Medrash wants to know, what is the difference between the two? Why one lady comes, no one harasses her. 7 comes in Midian, they get harassed. And the Manas Kahuna, the commentary on the Medrash, says the difference between Haran and Midian was that Avraham lived in Haran, and through observing Avram, through his teachings, him being a role model, they learned in Haran how to fear God. This was the episode of Yaakov and Rachel was 162 years after Avram was there in Haran. Yet his influence, the hashpah, the influence that he had on that city, completely transformed the city centuries later into a city of morality, a city of ethics, that 162 years later, the shepherds did not touch Rachel. Midian, however, never was exposed to an Avraham. And therefore, it didn't matter how many women were there, they were harassed. Here with the Savannah community, I see some Rebbeim on the video, and for sure, Rabbi Slatus, myself, my family, the community, the city of Savannah has been completely transformed because of the role models there, especially Rabbi Slatus, what he means to the community, what he means to myself, and the entire city of Savannah. God willing, that hashpah, that influence, should continue to last for centuries later, as we see from Avram, and the Savannah community, Savannah Kollel, should continue to grow from strength to strength. So before we speak about a couple of the customs of Purim, I want to ask some questions. We'll get back to the questions, but at least let them sit a little bit to think about, to see if we have some answers. If you were to ask someone, a Jew, describe the holiday of Purim, some might say, the Jews got jealous, there's Halloween, so they wanted to make their own Halloween, so we've got the Jewish version of Halloween. Others might say it's a day to just let loose. You have some l'chaims, you dress up, you eat a lot of food. It's a day to just, Judaism, there's so many rules, there's so many laws. It's so rigid. God gives us a day to just, blow off some steam. Is there something more to the day? Does that sound like a Jewish holiday? Is there something that we're missing? I'm sure we've all gone through Purim like that, just rushing through the day, not totally focusing on what exactly the holiday is about. And if we compare it to the other holidays, so we have Pesach. Pesach, the name itself of the holiday, many times describes the essence of the holiday. Pesach, Passover, was the culmination of many miracles that God did for us throughout our stay in Egypt, the 10 plagues culminating with the splitting of the sea. But Pesach, Passover, God passes over with the death of the firstborns. That was the final plague that represented the miracles that have never to be seen in this world ever again, once in the world's history. And that was at the time of Pesach. I understand why it's called Pesach. Shavuos, yes, it's called weeks. The essence of the day is the giving of the Torah. It happens to be, the Klei Yakar says, the reason why Shavuos is not called Torah Day is because God did not want people to think that the Torah is limited to just one day. All right, today's the day that we study Torah. That's it. I fulfilled my Torah study day. Rather, it's every single day. There's not one day designated for Torah Day. So Shavuos is the weeks leading up, preparation to the giving of the Torah. But there's a reason, at least, why Shavuos is not described, called by its day as we know it, but the essence is huge. The Torah was given. Sukkot represents the miracle of God protecting us for 40 years in the desert in harsh environments. I understand why Sukkot, Hanukkah, the Chanu Chav Hey, that they dedicated the tabernacle on the 25th, and much later on it was rededicated during the story of Hanukkah. Each of these holidays, the name represents a tremendous miracle or a tremendous aspect of the story. Yet we come to Purim, and then you like scratch your head, like, did the rabbis miss it? The name Purim comes from the word pur, which means lottery. Haman cast a lottery to decide which month should be the best month for the Jewish people to be destroyed. Well, that's the best name that we could come up with, describing the time during the story that our fate was sealed or the fate was determined that we are going to be destroyed. That's the name of the holiday. We couldn't come up with a better way of describing God's salvation in the miracle of Purim. We call it lottery. But it's not just lottery. Haman cast one lottery. The holiday of Purim is called lotteries, plural. Where was there two lotteries? And lastly, the Vilna Gaon quotes the Arizal that says that what we would think the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, which in many aspects it is a day, Yom, a day, Kippur, like Purim. Meaning Purim has an element of holiness. Purim has some aspect to it that is holier than Yom Kippur, that the name itself, Yom Kippur, suggests that it's a day like Purim. So again, what we would describe as Purim seems to be, we may be missing something, or what is the essence of this day of Purim that we could learn from? Before we discuss these answers, I just wanted to share a couple thoughts on the customs of Purim. We have a custom to dress up. We have a custom to give mishloach manos, gifts to our friends. Where does this come from? Purim, the Gemara tells us, was the day that the poor people would be so excited for. They would wait because their donations would be given. They would be able to go and ask. Their needs would be provided by the many people giving gifts to the poor. But if anyone was in that situation, it would be extremely embarrassing. You have to go knock on the door. Everybody sees you going to knock on the door. I have to ask them money. People see me in that moment of shame, that moment of vulnerability, that I have to depend on somebody else. I can't provide. Therefore, our rabbis instituted, we dress up. We give mishloach manos. Now, I don't know. The onlooker doesn't see the poor person coming to knock on the door. Yeah, they'll knock on the door. And you see whatever the costume is. Okay, I'm a poor person. They quickly show their face. Nobody else sees the plight of this person. Or they're going to deliver mishloach manos. The fact that you went ahead and knocked on this person's door doesn't mean that you're poor. Maybe you're going to deliver a gift for your friend. It was all to help us be sensitive to those in need. Dressing up, giving gifts is to help conceal the embarrassment of those that are truly in need. We find similarly, the soldiers, the Torah tells us when they would go out to war. So someone who planted a vineyard, just got married, built a new house, they're exempt from war. But it also says those who are fearful of sin, they're going to go into battle. Maybe they've done something wrong. They're going to be killed. This is a time that God could exact his punishment. They should also go. Do I want to admit to everybody? All of a sudden, they're like, oh, okay, if the only announcement was anyone who's fearing that they might have done something wrong, a sin, they all of a sudden leave. And everyone's like, I wonder what he did. All of a sudden, the gossip starts. They're trying to think, well, all right, I thought he was a kosher dude. And all of a sudden now he's leaving. He must have some crazy private life. Therefore, God said other people will be included in this exemption. So now nobody will know. Is it because you're afraid of sin? Maybe you planted a new vineyard. Maybe you built a new house. All to protect the sensitivities of the sinner, protect the sensitivities of the poor. We have a custom to eat ham and tashin on Purim. So we know that ham and tashin is the three-cornered triangle food. And maybe some of us have heard, we'll share it anyway. The three corners represent our patriarchs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The word Haman Tashin is plural. Singular is Haman Tash. It comes from the combination of two words, Haman and Tush, which means weakened. Haman was weakened by the merit that the three patriarchs provided for the Jewish people. When Haman understood that these three patriarchs were there to protect the Jewish people, he was weakened. His plan, he knew at the end of the day, was going to fail. But it's a little deeper. Avram represented chesed, kindness. Yitzchak represents avoda, service. Yaakov represents Torah, the study of Torah. And the Jewish people became lax in these three. And that's when Haman came to power. That's when the decree was sent out, and Mordechai understood that because they were lax in these three specific areas, he instituted a fast day for 3 days to be machazek, to strengthen them in these three areas. Chesed, we do on Purim, give gifts to the poor. We give gifts to our friend, performing kindness to others. Avoda, which is symbolic of tefillah, of prayer and fasting, the Jewish people did at that time to rectify what they did wrong. And Torah, Mordechai was teaching them Torah. Many Gemara, Midrashim that talk about the Torah that Mordechai was teaching. That was there to rectify what they did. The three pillars that the patriarchs stood for, those are the three pillars of the Haman Tashin. But I saw something this year that blew my mind. I wanted to share with you. Haman Tashin are also referred to as Ozne Haman, the ears of Haman. Now, I never really saw Haman. Maybe his ears were triangular. I don't know. Maybe that's what they look like. But there are commentaries that give a deeper reason for why Haman Tashin are called ears of Haman. And again, to me, this is one of the greatest beauties of Judaism. You take a food item, Haman Tashin. Yeah, everybody eats it, everybody makes it, but it could be transformed into something so spiritual, so special that when we take a bite of it, we could tap into this message of the Haman Tashin. Why are they referred to ears? The commentaries explain that all the nations, after the splitting of the sea, we say in Az Yashar, they all heard about God, the plagues. Egypt, this great mighty country, was decimated. We say in Az Yashar that this fear, this dread fell upon all the kingdoms. In Israel, they heard about it. And they were afraid to go ahead and attack the Jewish people. However, there was one nation that went ahead and attacked. That was the nation of Amalek. They made it as if they didn't hear. Of course they heard what happened. Every nation did, but they acted as if they didn't hear. Their descendant, much later as well, Haman, when he went ahead and made his decree, asked Achashverosh, there was a whole back and forth brought down in the Gemara. Are you crazy, Haman? You want to go ahead and attack the Jewish people? Achashverosh said, you know what happened to every king, every nation that went ahead and started up with them? I'm not messing with the Jewish people. Haman made it as if he didn't hear. We eat the ears of Haman as what they are referred to remember this aspect. This trait, what we shouldn't do, be receptive to the messages of God, not act as if we didn't hear. But there's one more level. The Megillah says that Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, that the Jewish people accepted and established Purim on themselves. And the Gemara says that it doesn't just mean the holiday of Purim, but they re-accepted the Torah. When the Jewish people accepted the Torah, yes, they said, Nasa v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. A tremendous act of devotion to God. But there was still some hesitancy afterwards. And God held up the mountain over their head and said, accept the Torah or here will be your grave. So at the time of the giving of the Torah, they accepted the Torah, but it was ba'ones, it was forced. During the days of Purim, the Gemara tells us that they re-accepted the Torah not out of force, but willingly, out of love, through the miracle that God performed for them. What was the aspect that they didn't accept beforehand and now they were accepting out of love? When the Torah was initially given, there's two aspects. There's Torah Shebechsav, the written law, Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law. The written law they accepted. I see it. I can read it. I can understand it. But the oral law, many times, I don't see it in front of me. I'm banking on somebody else telling me it's much harder to understand. It's much harder to accept. There was hesitancy in the Jewish people at the time of Har Sinai. But when it came time to Purim, through the love that they had towards God through the miracle, they willingly accepted both aspects of the Torah, not just the written like they had before, but the oral law as well in its entirety. How is the oral law transmitted? Yes, today it's written down, but that wasn't the way it was intended to be. Initially, it was passed down from generation to generation, teacher to student, by speaking, student listening. Without the ears, the Torah would never be able to be transmitted, the oral law. It would have ceased to exist. We eat the ears of Haman because through Haman, through seeing God's hand, we reaccepted the oral law transmitted through the power of our ears, listening to our teachers teach us the Torah. Why a Hamantash and why three corners? Because the oral law, what makes it up, the meat and potatoes of it, are three components. The Mishnah, the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, and the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud. That is the oral law. Everything comes from it. Those three corners of the oral law is the three corners of the ears of Haman that caused us to reaccept the Torah when we take a bite of those Hamantashen. Irrelevant of what you fill it with. Remember, that is what's keeping us going. The oral law transmission from generation to generation, reaccepted through Haman's decree. Let's go back to our questions. The holiday of Purim, what's it all about? And just by the way, if anybody has a comment, question, please feel free to unmute yourself. The holiday of Purim, where did it get its name? What is the essence of the day? A day like Purim. Why is it called a lottery, our darkest time? And why is it lotteries, plural? The Megillah begins, and there's a discussion about this in the Gemara. Why actually do we read the Megillah from the part where we start? We should really begin to read from where things start to take a turn. When Achashverosh couldn't sleep. And that's when really things, the snowball effect happened. And before you knew it, Haman was killed. But up until then, it kind of drags, okay, we're going, just to make services a little longer. That's what the Megillah is there for. And the Vilna Gaon says, the beginning of the Megillah says that Achashverosh was sitting in his palace in the city of Shushan. He was sitting on his throne. Why is the Megillah pointing out Shushan, his capital? Who cares where the miracle happened? And the Vilna Gaon says something phenomenal. He says that Achashverosh was Babylonian, right? He was of Babylonian descent. Why was the kingdom in Persia? Achashverosh heard, he saw, he wanted Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon's throne. He had this magnificent, awesome throne. And he wanted to have a replica made of it. He wasn't able to actually sit in it, but he wanted to have a replica made. So he commissioned, the only people that were able to build this throne were the Jewish people in the city of Shushan. He commissioned them. It took 3 years for them to build this throne. They send the message back to Achashverosh. The throne is ready. The problem is, it is so big that we cannot transport it to Bavel, to Babylon. Achashverosh said, that's fine. I'm moving the whole kingdom to Persia, to Shushan. And the Vilna Gaon says, God was setting in motion. Because who lived in Shushan? As we read in the Megillah, there was a man who lived in Shushan. His name was Mordechai. God orchestrated it that the entire kingdom of Bavel, of Babylon, which ended up becoming the Persian exile, was moved to Shushan because Mordechai was there. The whole Megillah story that we read about, Mordechai's job, Bigsan and Seresh, Mordecai going back and forth to Esther. Esther would have been taken as the queen in Bavel and Babylon. There was no text messaging. There was no social media where, okay, let me change my status, Mordecai, I need you now. He would have to go back and forth, tremendous trips. The Purim story would not have happened the way that we know it. Haman's decree would have happened and everything else might never have. God orchestrated it years before that. Achashverosh moves his whole kingdom to Shushan because Mordecai lived in Shushan. And the Gemara gives a mashal, he gives a parable. There was a king who had a son. He loved his son so much. And that child, as he grew up, began to go off the path, causing his father trouble. And it came to a point that his father said, okay, this is just bad for the kingdom. The media is just going crazy over this, nonstop stories. I got to get him out of here. So the king brings him to this island or a forest, but let's call it an island. He brings him to this island, leaves him there. The kid is there. He thinks his father abandoned him. He's saying under his breath, who knows what. Maybe we've said it about our own. Maybe we haven't. But that's what's happening. The kid is, I can't believe my father abandoned me. And he's walking around. He's trying to figure out his way. And if someone comes over to him and says, oh, I see that you're new here. I've never noticed you before. Are you lost? Well, yeah, I actually just got here. Come stay with me for a little bit. So the son goes. He starts living with this person. He gets settled into this new city on this island. And he's venturing out one day, and all of a sudden, he's in the woods, and a bear is about to attack him. And lo and behold, right before the bear attacks him, an arrow comes out of nowhere, kills the bear. Somebody was there. Coincidence, the son thinks. Coincidence that somebody was there to to bring me into his home. Coincidence that somebody was there to shoot the bear. Okay, the next day or a couple weeks later, bandits try to attack. Somebody's there to help him. Coincidence after coincidence, and eventually the son stops and says, whoa, this is not a coincidence. I see that my father has been here all the time. He put people here on this island to watch over me, to protect me. And when I was in my vulnerable state, when I was in a place of need, they were there to protect me. The Vilna Gaon says this is exactly how God acts with us when we are in exile. God brings us into exile for whatever the reasons are, the sins that we as a nation have committed and we need to rectify. We go into exile, we think we've been abandoned. God has abandoned us, he's left us, we are alone, we are terrified. But then God sends a Mordecai. God sends those people that are there to protect us, to watch over us. And eventually, the dots click. The light bulb goes off where we say, God's been with me the whole time. God never abandoned me. He put in place, set in motion many different instances for us to be taken care of. God performs many hidden miracles through those righteous people, through means of nature, to go ahead and protect us. We put everything together. We realize that God is with us every step of the way. But it's not just necessarily in the good times, but it is there in the darkest times. We know the Megillah, there's so many codes in the Megillah. God's name is not explicitly mentioned in the Megillah. But the climax of the Megillah, the darkest moment for the Jewish people, was when they lost their lifeline. Throughout the whole story, Esther was in the palace. The Jewish people, yes, it's terrifying. Haman made a decree. We are going to be annihilated. But in the back of our heads, we had Esther in the palace. So we have somebody there that's got the king's ear. Hopefully, she will be able to save us from what this terrible decree is going to bring upon us. And then what happens? The climax, not necessarily what we think. The climax is the Jewish people are looking, and all of a sudden they see Achashverosh and Haman going to a party that Esther invited both. And oh my gosh. Esther is in with Haman. Esther and Haman are in cahoots. She's saved. She's in the palace. She's completely abandoned us. That was the point, the lowest point for the Jewish people, that we felt completely lost. We felt the most vulnerable because we were alone. And those words in the Megillah, Rabbeinu Machai tells us, I'll hold it up here because it's unbelievable. Hopefully you could see it here. Those 4 words, it says, Esther invited Yavo Hamelech veHaman Hayom, that the Melech, the king, Achashverosh, and Haman should come on that day. What are the first 4 letters of each word? Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Rabbeinu Bachai says the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, Hey is God's name to tell us that in our darkest moments, when we feel abandoned, Esther, our lifeline, has completely left us out to dry. That's it. She's fine. Moved on. Look at those 4 words where we felt most vulnerable, and who is with us? God is with us. The Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey. God is there at every single moment, our darkest moments. God is with us every step of the way. And this, my friends, is the essence of Purim. To realize that there are no coincidences in life. Nothing is by chance. God is with us again every step of the way, which is why Purim is called a lottery. Because to all of us, a lottery is the most random. A lottery is the most by chance. That's not a coincidence. You pick a number, pick numbers, buy your ticket. I didn't even look at the numbers, and all of a sudden you win. Okay. What are the chances? Slim to none. I've never won. But a lottery is the ultimate form of randomness, chance. And our rabbi said, we're going to call this name Purim because the reality is you may think a lottery is random, but there is no such thing. Every lottery has its determined winner. Every lottery is God orchestrating, choosing which person is the one that's specifically supposed to win. That specifically this is supposed to happen. So why is it called lotteries plural? Because there are always 2 lotteries. Haman rolled the dice, 12-sided dice, 1 side each and every month. And it landed on Adar. So Haman said, great, Adar, this is the best month for the Jewish people to be killed. Moshe died in this month. There's that lottery. There's that chance. But what about all the other numbers that are there that we don't see? There's the number that we see and we think that this is what it is. And then there's the other lottery that God says, you think you know what's going on. There's a totally different plan. There's a different lottery. You don't see that number. The only one that's sticking up at you is Adar. And the reason that you think is because Moshe died, but he was also born. Every single thing that Haman did throughout the Megillah ended up backfiring on him again to show this concept. There are 2 lotteries. Haman said, kill Vashti. For his benefit, Esther came about. Haman said, let's honor thinking himself. The honor was given to Mordecai. Haman said, let's build a gallows for Mordecai, who was hung on that gallows. There are always 2 lotteries. There's what we see, what we think is supposed to happen, and then there's God's lottery, which is not by chance, which is not random, orchestrating every single event around us to tell us there is so much more than what you see. There's much more going on behind the scenes, which brings us to our last question. What element does Purim have that Yom Kippur is called a day like Purim? If we would stop and think about it, these 2 days are polar opposites. You have Yom Kippur. We're sitting in uncomfortable shoes. Yeah, okay, maybe we dress up in a kittel. You know, I'll tell you, my wife, if she's on right now, she didn't appreciate this when we got engaged, but I went to the store and I put on the kittel. I have my father's sense of humor. I put on the kittel and I said to her, how do I look? She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, this is what I'm going to look like after 120 years. So she didn't appreciate the joke, but it was still, I thought it was a pretty good joke. So yeah, we kind of dress up on Yom Kippur, not the most flattering garment to dress up in. Nevertheless, it's a day of prayer. It's a day of fasting. We may even call it torture, affliction, not a day of Purim, which is just absolute fun, happiness, joy, polar opposites. What could Purim have? We would never associate Purim with Kedusha, with holiness. It's not a word that we would put as a synonym, as an adjective, sorry, Mrs. Rocco, I'm sorry, as an adjective to Purim. What Purim, if utilized properly, it can carry us through the entire year. And it could transform our Yom Kippur, even though it's months later. Because what is the essence of Yom Kippur? We really have to look at Purim. We haven't experienced the Pesach miracles, the Sukkot miracles of surviving in a desert for 40 years. These were out of this world miracles. And I'm sure maybe some of us have experienced miracles that were not in the realm of nature. They were these, God forbid, a car accident, this, we survived, this treatment, that, and we miraculously survived that we could say we experienced an open miracle, not to the level of the Exodus of Egypt, but some of us may be able to say that we've witnessed open miracles. But how often does that actually happen? What about the rest of the days of the year? What about the rest of our life where we go through the daily battles, the daily motions where, okay, God, I don't really see you. I'm not experiencing that wow, aha moment. And that is why there is a Purim, why we have Purim, to read the story of the Megillah, to see how God was setting everything in motion, as the Vilna Gaon said years before. Achashverosh wanted a throne. Coincidence? No, I need the setting to happen in Shushan. Mordechai is there. Let's bring the entire kingdom to Shushan. No such thing as coincidence. God is controlling, organizing, orchestrating every step. That is a perspective needed for the entire year. And when we have that perspective through a holiday of Purim, connecting the dots, seeing, wow, now I come to Yom Kippur. What do we do on Yom Kippur? Yeah, we go like this. But in essence, we're saying, I'm sorry. In order to properly say I'm sorry, to really sincerely feel I'm sorry, I have to feel that I am in a relationship. If I don't feel that I am in a relationship with whatever entity, God, a spouse, a child, a coworker, my sorry is not going to be sincere. My apology is not going to be felt because I don't feel it. Through a Purim, I see God is investing all of his time into me. He's setting me up every step of the way, orchestrating each and every one of our lives uniquely. And when I see how much God invests in me, how much God values my relationship with him, then I could begin to feel, I could begin to see, come to a Yom Kippur and say, I am truly sorry because I see how much this relationship means to you, God, and how I have been falling short in providing in this relationship. My sorry, this day of Yom Kippur becomes completely transformed through the holiday of Purim, which is why Yom Kippur is a day like Purim, because Purim is necessary to walk into Yom Kippur with a proper perspective, to feel that remorse, to feel that true relationship that we have with God. And if we think about our lives, preparing for this class, and I appreciate the opportunity because I was able to really think about many moments in my life, coming from South Africa, moving to Savannah. Why specifically Savannah? Living right next to Rabbi Slatus, having the merit to live right next to Rabbi Slatus for many years. Laning, which my father pushed me. I never really wanted to, but he would push me to go ahead and lane. And many years later, I'm up on the bima, not knowing that I'm going to be a rabbi of a community, but God saying, you're going to be a rabbi community one day. Go up and lane on the bima. So you could see what's going on. You could see how to run different aspects without actually having been trained. Because I know much later on, that's what's going to be needed. We don't see it right away. You know, maybe people in Louisville don't know this, but I almost didn't come to Louisville, not because I didn't like the city. I was learning with my chavrusa, who happened to be my brother-in-law at the time. I had no interest in leaving yeshiva. And a sign goes up in yeshiva, the Louisville community, 2 representatives are coming to pitch to come and build Torah in Louisville, Kentucky. I was like, yeah, okay, that's really nice. It's just, I'm not ready to leave yeshiva yet. So just, okay, move past the sign. So I go sit down, and my brother-in-law said, you got to go to the meeting. Just go to the meeting. What's the problem? Go to the meeting. I'm like, no, I have no interest. We're going back and forth. We start learning. And at the time that the meeting started, a minute before, he closed his Shulchan Aruch. We were studying for Smicha then. He closed his Shulchan Aruch and he said, that's it, go to the meeting. If it was any other chavrusa, any other study partner that I would have been learning with, they wouldn't have done that. My brother-in-law, there's a certain investment in me. We're related. He wants the best. He knew I wanted to be a pulpit rabbi. He closed and he said, go. Anyone else in the 400-person yeshiva, that would not have happened. I went to the meeting, and the rest was history. We made our way, thank God, to the great city of Louisville, Kentucky. But I never would have been able to do what I'm doing here without the unofficial training of the Savannah community. That's all orchestrated by God. Putting connecting the dots, seeing how God personally affects each and every one of us. You know, I'll share a story with you, not a little personal, but I learned in a chabura, there's 10 rabbis we learn together every morning. One of the rabbis is Rabbi Fish in Jacksonville, Florida. So we have study partners. I learn with the rabbi in Denver, and then every day for 15 minutes, we get on a Zoom, one of us presents. So he sends us this email after the Zoom. He gets on the Zoom and he shares us an email. He said, my sink clogged. I called the plumber. The plumber said he's going to come between 10 and 12. Our chabura every day is 11:15. So I decided I was going to learn at home that day. I didn't want to miss the plumber. The plumber comes at 11 o'clock. I set him up. I tell him what the issue was. The drain in the sink, the drain in the kitchen sink was clogged. And I go and turn on the chabura, and I'm listening to whoever was preparing. Afterwards, I shut off, and the plumber comes to me and says, "What was that Torah that you were studying?" So the rabbi's like, "Okay, this is the big burly plumber. I mean, come on, what's going on over here?" "Yeah, that was Torah." He said, "Well, you know, my grandmother was Jewish. She survived the Holocaust. She made her way over to Jacksonville. My grandmother," actually, he didn't say was Jewish. He said, "My grandmother." He said, "My grandmother's Jewish." So Rabbi Fish asked, "Is this your grandmother on your mother's side?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that makes you Jewish." So he said, "You know, I've completely left the Christian faith, but I've never actually gone to study Torah. I've always wanted to." And I was recently talking to one of my friends, and my friend said, "Go to the synagogue on San Jose Lane, or San Jose Boulevard. Go to the synagogue there." So Rabbi Fish really piqued his interest now. He's like, which synagogue? There's 2 synagogues on San Jose. And the plumber said, "The synagogue right next to the discount tire place." Rabbi Fish said, "I'm the rabbi of that synagogue. Let's start studying Torah together." Phenomenal story. It actually brought some tears to my eyes the first time I read it. We think that a clogged drain, it's annoying. What God is telling us is a clogged drain for you is a diamond for somebody else. This person wanted to always study Torah. Maybe they didn't have the guts to go ahead and take the plunge, make the call. Fine. He's a plumber. I'm going to clog your drain, the rabbi. So now the ball is in your court. He is in your house. That's God walking with us every single step of the way. Purim is a time to take the opportunity. Recently, I can't see, but if Mrs. Judy Rosen or Joey is on, Savannah community has the opportunity. I'm sure if you speak to Joey and ask him, starting from the beginning, the many different, what we may call coincidences, in reality miracles, happen to him every step of the way in order to get him to where he is today with, thank God, a healthy heart, could inspire each and every one of us to go into Purim and say, God is with me. God loves me. He has a relationship. He invests so much in me. The way we do it is write down something every day. Some seeming coincidence. It rained today. My car happened to be this. Recently, we had major snow. My car was in the shop. You know what? I didn't actually recognize it until God was doing me the biggest kindness. I didn't have to shovel out my car. It was in the shop. I came back to a plowed driveway. Great, amazing. We think it's annoying. God is saying, I have a relationship with you. I love you. I'm here every step of the way with you. Purim is a time to focus on that relationship, not just to get involved with the joy, the happiness, but to stop and reflect for a few moments and see, connect the dots. God is with us every step of the way. He invests so much in us. Our relationship with God will be greatly enhanced because of the relationship we see that he has towards each and every one of us. Have a freilich and Purim, a wonderful, happy, healthy, safe Purim. And God willing, we will use this Yontif to uplift ourselves, and may we share many simchas, many Torah opportunities together. Thank you again for the opportunity to share some Torah with you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Great.
Mr. Koch, thank you.
Yeah,
I want to
thank
thank
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
We got to thank Rabbi Snaid
Thank
for
you.
sharing his time with us and sharing these beautiful words of inspiration. It's been a wonderful experience and nice to see both communities here. This is really a first, not, I shouldn't say a first, but it's a unique experience for us. And I hope everybody is taking this message to heart. And just in case somebody might have, by mistake, spaced out for a second in the middle somewhere, this was recorded. And I will make the recording available for everybody here in Savannah, and I will send it to Rabbi Snaid, so it will be available for everybody in Louisville as well. And I want to thank everybody for coming, and I think Rabbi Snaid will probably stay on the line for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Now's the time.
Thank you. You know, I was going to say, I was going to ask everybody if they feel comfortable to actually turn on their cameras before. I need to see that I'm actually performing my duties as a rabbi. If anyone falls asleep, I need to know I'm doing a good job. I can't tell if I'm doing a good job with everyone, just their names right there. And I would love to see, obviously, everybody's smiling face. That's the most important.
Here, go smile.
All right. Anybody, any comments, questions?
Well, this is Aunt Judy,
Yeah.
and you made me cry. So it was beautiful. It really was. And I was thinking it as you said it, or before you even said it. What a miracle the whole joy has been. So.
And you know what? That may be. I'll ask the Savannah Kollel. That may be a class that Savannah Kollel should do. Come hear the story of Joey Rosen from the beginning till the end. I guarantee you, it's something to be inspired. A, from him, and B, from God's care of each and every one of us.
Rabbi said that Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. I was brought up thinking that Shabbos is the holiest day of the year, and then the holiest year of all, day of all is the Yom Kippur when it falls on Shabbos. Correct me, which is which?
Yom Kippur and Shabbos have similarities where they are both equal in holiness. Purim just has this aspect that Yom Kippur does not. That's you are correct. Yom Kippur is holier than Purim, but Purim has an aspect that Yom Kippur. All right. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Frankie.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great.
I do want to mention
Let's go.
this class was sponsored.
Thank you very much.
That this class was sponsored in part by the Moss family and his mother, and hope everybody enjoyed. And like I said, I'll be sending out the recording probably tomorrow. Thanks for coming.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
Purim.
Thank you. Happy Purim.
Welcome, Purim. Good night.